This is a new episode of the Marketing Meeting, and my guest is Christopher Penn today, co-founder and chief data scientist of TrustInsights. Welcome, Christopher.
Thank you for having me.
So I'll tell you two stories about you that is related with me. So one is that I have two Christopher personas in my mind. One of them is the, person that I rely on, the authority that I rely on when it comes to marketing technology, data science, and also machine learning. And that person is the person that I follow on LinkedIn. And the other person is the, co-host of the podcast that I've listened to for so many years, Marketing Over Coffee. And the interesting thing, and I don't know why it happened, but interesting thing is that I thought that these two big people were two different people in my mind. And then when you accepted to interview with me, I was just checking your proof and I'm just, oh my God, he's a co-host of Marketing Over Coffee. How come is that?
Yep, same person.
Same person. And I got so excited after that. And I said, okay, shall I ask a few questions about the podcast or should it lean on to more to AI and marketing? So here I am and I have a few questions and I'll keep it quite focused on the AI.
You can ask whatever you want. We've got the hour, so.
Okay, that's good. So, Christopher, I'm going to start with a broader question about the future of marketing. So, in your opinion, what will be one of the most significant things AI will change how we do marketing in the next few years?
I don't know. And I say that not to be flippant, but the technology around artificial intelligence, particularly generative AI, which is the AI that can make stuff, is evolving so quickly that we can't even forecast what will happen in 3 months versus 3 years. For example, the technology that powers a lot of today's language models is a technology from 2017 called transformers. This was invented by Google, actually, and the technology is now 7 years old. There are some newer technologies that have just come out this year, structured space models as one example, that are promising to do what transformers can do, but much more either efficiently or more powerfully. Now, these architectures are new. They are not mature by any means. And people are still trying to figure out what all they do. And there's sort of additional meta architectures like Mixture of Experts, which came out in the 90s, but in the context of generative AI really landed well at the end of 2023 that deliver very high performance language models on very small compute budgets. You can download, there's a model called Mixtral from the French company Mistral that you can run on a good gaming laptop, right? So, if your laptop can play Call of Duty at full resolution, you can run Mixtral at home. And it has the same capabilities and fluency that the GPT 3.5 model does from OpenAI. Now, when you think about it, one of those runs on a laptop, the other runs in a room full of servers. That's a huge difference in terms of compute power needed to deliver the same capability. So all of this very technical stuff is a long-winded way of saying the space is moving so quickly that we don't know what will happen. What we can say with reasonable certainty is the technology will get easier to use. It'll become more available. It will continue to decline in cost, as most technologies do as they mature. And the way people use them will continue to evolve. Today, a lot of marketers are using these technologies, I would say, not to be insulting to marketing, but in very pedestrian ways. Like, let's write a blog post about B2B marketing. Like, okay, that's great. That's a good use of the technology. It's not what it's really good at, but it's a good use of the technology, but it's also very basic. It's a starting point, as opposed to, say, something slightly more advanced, where if you are fluent in a language like Python, for example, you can say, hey, I've got this monthly reporting that I hate doing, right? It's like 82 PowerPoint slides in a deck. Let's have a language model like the one that powers ChatGPT write Python code to make PowerPoint slides that contain all this stuff. And then at the end of every month, I just push go on the Python script. And what used to take me 16 hours, 2 full days at work, I can now get done in 5 minutes and then move on with my day and be much more efficient and taking away a lot of repetitive pain. Those technologies right now require, a little bit of skill, technical skill, but again, they will continue to get easier and easier to use, get friendlier and friendlier to work with over time. So marketers should be looking for the rapid evolution of these technologies, and then be on the lookout for use cases that are a hybrid between marketing and something else. So marketing and IT, marketing and coding, marketing and statistical analysis. If you go into ChatGPT's paid version, there's a module called Advanced Data Analysis where you can upload spreadsheets and things and have it do advanced statistics and you don't need to have any statistical skill. You can say, hey, I need to build an attribution model for this HubSpot data. Make sure you remove all the sensitive data from it. And it will say, great, what kind of algorithm would you like to use? And your average market will be like, I don't know, recommend one. And it will say, well, here, this one is probably a good fit for this data. Let's use that. And it will do the analysis, build the code, run the analysis, and give you the charts right inside the module. So these are all use cases that marketing, I think, is only starting to realize.
So my dilemma here is that when you have been talking about that, is that the current marketing skill set is not based on, okay, I understand that reporting and data analysis and so on would quite a lot handled by AI. But even handling that data and using AI to get you the report, it requires a skill set where the current marketer in the industry doesn't have that skill set too much. When I look to my peers in marketing, they are mainly, building up the consumer insights, making the connection between the brand and the consumer, and coming up with a creative niche idea that connects consumer with the brand. So I see that the marketing role needs to evolve going forward. But then what are the main skills that a marketer need to adopt, or the organizational change the marketing teams would do, because the marketers won't be able to adapt probably in just 1 year and then learn coding and learn data insights. So what do you think about the organizational and people skill set change?
What I have said for years upon years now, is that AI will not take your job. A marketer who is skilled with AI will take the jobs, plural, of marketers who are not skilled with AI. So the first and foremost meta skill set, I would say, is becoming fluent with generative AI, being able to use tools like ChatGPT or DALL-E or Stable Diffusion or any of these things to dramatically accelerate the amount of work that you can get done in the same time period. That will free up the time you need to advance your skills, to spend more time on professional development. All of these generative tools are conversational. The interface is conversational, right? It's literally called ChatGPT. It's like, a text string. And what people have not realized yet, to some degree, is that you can have conversations with these tools and say, hey, I've got this task. How would you think about solving it, right? I need to build a consumer profile for this segment of my audience. Give me some questions to ask this segment of my audience in surveys and focus groups. A more advanced application that I did recently, I used a tool called Silly Tavern, which is role-playing software, which is typically used for role-playing games and other things. And instead, because marketers ruin everything, I built synthetic consumer personas, of here's your average household person, a caretaker, here's a pet owner, whatever. And then these synthetic personalities, I put them in a room and said, let's talk about this thing. And it was a focus group. It was a virtual focus group where each model was behaving and acting as that individual. And so I could get a first pass understanding of what the market might think of my product or service from this. And then it would give me, say, better questions to ask to an actual focus group of humans, or better questions to ask on a quantitative survey, because these language models, have been built with enormous amounts of text. We're talking 6, 7, 8, 9 petabytes of text data, which, to give you a sense of context, your really nice laptop these days comes with 1 terabyte of disk space, right? That's if you buy a really nice expensive laptop. These language model databases, just to store the text, would require 7,000 laptops. Right? That's how much text it is. No images, no anything else, just text. That's how big this stuff is. And so because these models have been trained on this huge repository, they have a lot of knowledge in aggregate about pretty much any given subject. So you can talk to them and extract some of that information. Now you have to fact check it, because the nature of a language model is to put together statistically correct responses that may or may not be factually correct, but they are statistically relevant based on what's inside these models. So you do have to fact check these things. But when you're talking about marketing skills, it really is what of all the tasks you do as a marketer, how much of each task or subtasks can be either done by artificial intelligence or augmented in some way within a new capability. And that's where marketers need to spend their time. We just released our first generative AI for marketers course. It's an online course. It's like 6 hours of just basic training on this stuff. And I'm already working on an advanced prompt engineering course, because it's already apparent that there's some additional things people need to know once you get the basics down. But you've got to get the basics down first.
So, and then, to sum up this part, so what are the tasks that are autonomously will be handled probably in the next 1 year, let's say, because it's like a long period already for AI. What's the autonomous task that can be handled easily for a marketing role by AI? And what are the tasks that a marketer still need to take care of using AI?
So there's 6
Not
broad
using
categories.
AI, yeah.
There's 6 broad categories of tasks, because there's an infinite number of tasks. Generation, extraction, summarization, rewriting, classification, and question answering are the 6 big categories. So generation, everybody knows that. Write me a blog post, right? Write this email, write this sales copy, write this whatever. And they're good at that. They're pretty good at that. But you do need very detailed prompts if you want to get the best possible performance. Extraction is getting data out of something. So like, hey, here's this long PDF that somebody released where all the data is scattered throughout. Extract the data and turn it into a table, right? And that I can export. Pretty straightforward. Extracting data is very useful. Summarization is a huge one. Hey, here's a big pile of text, turn it into a small pile of text. If you've ever listened to podcasts, for example, you can say, here's the transcript from this podcast, summarize it into 20 bullet points so that I can see whether I need to listen to this episode or not. I do this a lot with things like SEO. I will get YouTube videos and pull the transcripts from them. We're talking hours and hours of video every month, and I will dump that into a language model and say, just give me the bullet points. And I'll end up with 30 bullet points from 20 hours of video. Like, okay, that's 20 hours of video I don't need to watch just to see the same, 8 bullet points reiterated over and over again. Rewriting is a big one. Here's a piece of text, rewrite it, translate it to a different language, write it to be from this perspective. One of my favorite tasks in rewriting is professional development and training. So like here, let's take a very complex concept. For example, in language models, there is the concept of model parameters and model weights. These are calculations for a language model. When I first had a tool explain this to me, I'm like, I still don't understand it. The mathematics is very complex. I said, rewrite this explanation in terms of pizza. And it said, your model parameters are the variety of ingredients on the top of the pizza, and the model weights are how much of each ingredient you got. Like, oh, now I understand it. So anything that you don't understand, you can have a model rewrite in a context you do understand. Classification is classify this text, right? Personality analysis, sentiment, you name it. Really, really good at that. Sentiment analysis, if you ever wanted to do sentiment analysis, these are the tools to do it. And the last one is question answering. They're good at answering general questions with some hallucinations, some factual issues. They're really good, though, at answering questions from data you provide. So like, hey, here's a new academic paper on this thing. I have some questions on this. You ask the model questions based on the data that you provide, and it spits out answers. Take, for example, hours and hours of transcripts from your call center. Hey, what are the 5 topics that people have complained about at the call center this week that are the most prominent? And we'll tell you. And you could say, okay, well, why, what are the reasons from that? Asking questions of your data. So those are the big 6 sets of categories that AI can do. The things that AI can't really do right now would fall outside of those 6. And the reality is those 6 cover most of what marketers do. There's very little that marketers don't do that wouldn't fit in one of those 6 categories. Even things like creativity, like divergent thinking, brainstorming. there's a paper in Nature magazine, which is a prominent academic journal, that demonstrated that on average, in a head-to-head contest on the same tasks, AI models are more creative on average than the same humans doing those tasks. And it turns out the reason for that is there are a whole bunch of people with really bad ideas. And so even things like creativity is on the table for these models to do.
Mm-hmm.
So our job as marketers is to say, of all the tasks we do in our day-to-day work, do they fit in one of these 6 categories? If they do, that's a candidate for AI to help us do that task.
Mm-hmm. But then what would be the thing that a marketer would add value then in that case?
The marketer is the way I like to, and I've said this for years and years, you're going to go from being an individual performer to a manager, right? So you're going to go from being first violin to the conductor of the orchestra, except that your employees are all machines, right? So, hey, machine, write me the first draft of this press release. Hey, machine, summarize this conference call. Hey, machine, do this, that, the other thing. And then you as the marketer are going to synthesize that and then decide on courses of action and then direct those courses of action. So you're effectively becoming a manager. You're just managing the machines.
Well, yeah, that's. I would add 2 things. I would challenge actually 2 things over there, because one of them is the consumer personas. You mentioned that it's, you can build up the personas through AI. But for example, when I do a lot of persona work, because, it's a big part of my job. And then when I, for example, search for personas for this type of business and so on, generally what I get on internet is usually like 80% of the time is very mediocre or standard stuff that, I need to refine it by doing really specific customer interviews. And then you'll just get that. I mean, in one customer interview, you'll just have a moment where he or she says something, and that suddenly opens up and sparkles an idea about a creative campaign sometimes, or like offering that we can to the customer. So what do you think about that part? I mean, like, should we rely on AI still, or would it be something that is going to get better over the years?
It is for something there are specific questions. You can absolutely ask AI for sort of first draft information, but the real value there is the data you've already collected, right? So you already have recordings and transcripts and stuff like that, and you can use these tools to synthesize and build a persona that is much more finely detailed based on the original data that you are providing. So you may have, 20 years or 10 years of this specific kind of persona. Get all that transcript, get the machines to summarize it down, to pull out the key highlights, and then that becomes essentially your program, your character card, if you will, of who that exact person is. And then from there, you can use that to condition the machine to say, like, you're going to respond as this person. Here's all of the information that should guide your responses. Here's the style, here's the knowledge, the subjects, the points of view that particular person will have. And it can do that. You can create from its own latent space, its own memory, plus your very specific guardrails. It will produce very high quality results. Because yes, if you just use stuff on the internet that's very bland and generic, of course you will get very bland and generic results, right? The more specific the guardrails you put on any machine, the more specific outputs you're going to get.
Perfect. And I love how you describe the orchestration part of it, because as a marketer, that one of the biggest tasks that we do is orchestrate people, like orchestrate agencies, orchestrate people that is feeding you data and so on. Whereas I feel that, we need to get used to orchestrating machines as well. But I still believe that we will need to orchestrate a lot of connections, real human connections as well, because, what I do as a marketer is build and connect the brands with the correct creators as well. And, getting a list of those creators is one thing, but approaching those creators and making the collaboration with the brand and the creator in a natural way would be another task. I think that will continue to be on our job profile, in my opinion, but I love how you describe the orchestration piece. I have another question, Dan. Is there a risk of over-reliance on AI in marketing, Dan? Like, neglecting core marketing principles or human creativity?
It depends. It depends on the talent you've got to work with. Generally speaking, when machines are producing outputs, they are producing outputs that are mathematical averages of the data that they were given plus the conditioning based on the prompt, right? So again, the more specific the prompt is for a language model, as an example, the more specific the output will be, but it will still be an averaged output of just that very specific focus point. With humans, it's all variable. It's highly variable. If you think of people as like, A players, B players, and C players, machines will generally have a difficult time reliably reproducing all the different things that an A player can do well, right? So they can easily do B player stuff. They can completely supplant C players. So the question is, when you look at your bench, is your bench of employees A players, B players, and C players? What mix is that? If you have one A player and 10 C players, you have one A player and a bunch of machines, because you can swap out the C player's lack of output with machines that will do that very easily. If you have 10 A players and one C player, then you have a bench of people who are, the highest caliber performers, and they will use machines to accelerate and augment the boring stuff that will give them the mental bandwidth and the time to really shine at what they do. Again, here's the challenge, and I think all managers know this. The percentage of A, B, and C players you have is skewed, right? It's very rare to have a company where your whole team is A players, right? Yeah. It doesn't happen very often. Most of the time, your team is mostly B players. You got a couple of C's, and you might have one or two A players. So a good chunk of the eligible work for marketing as a discipline can and should be handled by machines. If you've got all C players, you really should be looking at machines very heavily, because machines can be B players, right? Machines are solid B plus players. If you have less than B plus players on your team, you are looking at a team that can be consolidated and have the majority of the work done by machines. If you have a bench of all A players, yeah, you're going to be using A players for a while. The machines are not going to supplant them anytime real soon.
Oh, that's an eye opener, and that sparkled another question. So many people that, like you have like solid background, and you have been talking about this for many years now, but there are also people that have been only into the space for like a couple of months after ChatGPT, and both people are considered or seen as A players of AI in the industry. How does that go? I mean, because a person who has a little bit more knowledge than any other person in AI, in marketing, for example, can be considered as an A plus player now in this area. It's a dilemma that I have right now.
It is. In fact, I was at a conference last year where they said, for our speakers on the AI track, we will not consider anyone who's not been in the space for at least a year, because there are so many overnight experts who have very little expertise. The differentiator for expertise in any discipline is that an expert knows what's going to go wrong. Right? Anyone can push buttons in the right sequence. Here's the top 10 performing ChatGPT prompts. Well, okay, great. When ChatGPT changes its model from GPT-4 to GPT-4 Turbo and a bunch of prompts just suddenly break, do you know why? Do you know what happened? Do you know how the latent space behind the model changed? Because that's what's causing your prompts to suddenly go sideways. Experts know why things are going wrong, and experts can help anticipate things going wrong and prevent them from going wrong. That is the difference between an expert and someone who's not an expert, is that you know what's going to go wrong and you can mitigate that to some degree. When you build solutions with layers of abstraction so that you can fix things. This is one of the things that is very problematic by a lot of the vendors in the marketing technology space. There are a lot of companies every company now says they have AI on their product. One of the big questions to ask is, okay, well, describe the abstraction layer in your software that allows you to swap out models. And a lot of the time with vendors, you'll get a very kind of a little floating question mark over the head. Like, what does that mean? So it means your model is an engine. How easy is it for you to pull one engine out and put another engine in? Can I pull out GPT 3.5? And can I put in Mixtral? Can I put in Llama 2? Can I put in eventually Llama 3? And how does your architecture accommodate those changes? One of the things that, for example, IBM is doing with its offerings, and the Watson X offering is it's really called Bring Your Own Model. Here's our infrastructure. You put in the model you want to work with, and off you go, because there are a lot of models in the open source / open weight space where they're very highly customized. So there's one, for example, the model's name is called Karen the Editor, and all it does is grammar, nothing else. It is so finely tuned just to fix grammar and spelling. If you have a specific task that you want to use this model for, you should be able to pull out something else, put the other thing in, and off you go. And a lot of vendors in the marketing space right now say, like, yeah, we've got AI, but when you ask their engineering teams how they're architected inside, they're like, yeah, we're still on GPT-3 because we hard coded that into the system, and now it's going to be a massive cost to swap that out.
Wow. Okay. Do you think that OpenAI or Google models, I mean, are they like, which one would you lean on to when it comes to working with ChatGPT, let's say?
Well, so ChatGPT is an OpenAI product, so it's always going to use OpenAI's models. Mm-hmm. There are any number of actual models that you can test out. For example, Google right now, their current model that is accessible to the public is Gemini Pro, which is not great. Gemini Pro returns some really, really dumb results. And this is one of the ongoing, again, big question marks floating all over heads is, how did Google get this so wrong, despite having like the world's largest data source that they have the right to use? We don't know what happened there. Again, it depends on the use case. So, for example, if you are working with, say, protected information like social security numbers, healthcare data, national defense data, things like that, you would be using a model like Mixtral that you would run on your own hardware with no internet connection whatsoever, so that data never ever leaks, right? Because a lot of open weights models you can run in a secure environment. You absolutely positively could never hand that off to a company like ChatGPT's, like OpenAI, because you don't know where that data is going to go. And if it has to be protected, you have to use models that are specifically designed for that use. What will probably happen, and what we're already seeing with tools like Microsoft's AutoGen, is the ability to mix and match, to blend things, to create ensembles of models. So there's an example with AutoGen where it has a big language model generating some text, and then there's a second model running alongside it that has a very specific set of rules that is then fact-checking what comes out of the first model and returning it when it violates the rules. So you may have a small language model saying, I'm looking for racism, sexism, misogyny, etc. in this text. And then that model sits here, and then the big model produces something. The small model says, hey, that's racist, try again. And it's a way of these things essentially competing with each other to generate better outputs. So that's an example of where things are likely to go, is you'll have ensembles of these different tools working together for higher quality outputs. One of the things we have to be very careful of as consumers of AI is any tool or system or model saying, hey, this is the answer. Like, no, it's not the answer. It's an answer, but it's there should be part of an ecosystem around that. There is no magic wand. There's no one model that rules them all. There are different tools for different purposes.
Mm-hmm. As we talked about Google, then I remembered that Google had launched an artificial intelligence chatbot for ad buyers recently for UK and US. I guess it's in beta as far as I know. So how do you think AI will generate and optimize marketing content like, ad copy or ad creative? Yeah, website copy, I think AI can handle that very, very nicely. But I mean, on those areas, do you think we will still need human creativity there?
That's a maybe. That's a maybe. We're seeing Meta is doing a tremendous amount with ad generation. And Meta, of course, has some of the world's largest licensed data sources, right? If you read Meta's terms of service on any of their services, like, they can basically use any data you put into their service for any of their model training. So they have one of the world's largest catalogs of images called Instagram, right? They have one of the world's largest catalogs of text called Facebook, and WhatsApp, and so on and so forth. They have a new text generation source called Threads. And again, we are all feeding essentially the raw data sets that Meta has to work with. And they have rolled out programmatic AI-driven advertising capabilities on their platforms. And those capabilities, right now, they scale best with big budgets, right? Because you need big budgets to run the tests of a lot of variations. It's just the nature of the beast. But as their models get smarter over time, you'll need less and less budget to take advantage of what it sees as working. For programmatic sort of commodity advertising, I really think that is an area where AI is going to just run things, right? So it's going to just run stuff that, here's 2,800 variations of this ad image for, this new microphone. And it will just look at what performs and optimize on that. For big concept stuff, I think that will be, in the short term at least, still probably in the human domain, if for no other reason than accountability reasons, right? If you're going to spend $6 million on a Super Bowl ad, you want someone's neck to choke when it doesn't go well, right?
Yeah.
So you want an agency to blame for that as a stakeholder. But yeah, I think as risk decreases, AI use increases, because if one ad doesn't land well, oh well, right? Just have the machine try again.
Yeah. I mean, like I also believe on my side, as a person who has been working a lot with performance marketers and also creative marketers on brand marketing campaigns, like big Super Bowl ads type of things. I also believe that like within the next year, one of the biggest things would be about like performance marketing and ad generation for that, because you don't need to have so sophisticated stuff there. It's quite data driven. I agree on that. One final topic would be about trust. How can we build trust with consumers regarding the use of AI? Because marketing is all about communicating with the consumer and with people. And AI and machine learning would get better when we let these machines learn more from us.
It all comes down to disclosure and transparency. Tell people what is AI when you're using it. You'll be required to do so under law fairly soon. The EU AI Act, once it becomes ratified with the member states, will require that for anyone doing business in the EU or with EU citizens, which is pretty much everybody, because if someone's on your website, regardless of where you're located, but that visit is coming from the EU AI Act applies to you. And there was a paper done last year from MIT Sloan that showed that consumers do not have AI aversion. When given content and the source is disclosed that was machine generated, the consumer did not respond less favorably to the use of AI. And so there is no harm in disclosure. And then there is a level of trustworthiness and saying like, yeah, this piece of content, this image, whatever, this is AI generated. 2024 will be the year that people realize just how badly AI can be abused. We're already seeing it, but it's going to get much, much worse as the year goes on with the 2024 presidential election in the United States. We are already seeing abuses of AI, synthetic phone calls, using people's voices, things that will dramatically undermine trust, not in AI, believe it or not, but in all media. Right? People will simply not trust anything other than people that they know. And the consequence for that is that brands too will lose trust and credibility, not from anything the brand has done individually, but just as part of the ecosystem overall. You just don't believe anything anyone says. So from a brand perspective, disclosure and transparency is one of the few antidotes that you have. That and working with and building personal brands that are attached to your brand, personalities, humans. I call them conduits of authenticity, people that that you can go ask, hey, is this thing real? Like if I get this ad that just, that says some claim, there's a person I can reach out to that I know is human that I can say, is this thing real? And if that brand has done a good job of having those conduits of authenticity out in the relevant communities, they can help to mitigate questions when questions of trust come up.
Yeah. For example, personally, I started to rely more from the perspectives and insights that I have from people like you, like the authority in one big specific area, or like started to go back to reporters from Bloomberg, although I know that some of them are biased and also personal opinion and also like promoted opinion also. But I still started to, lean on these expert ideas and verified expert ideas rather than, just reading something on the internet. So to wrap up, I would like to ask very few practical questions. What was one practical tip for marketers who are just starting in AI? Where should they start?
The most practical tip is this. There is no substitute for doing it. There is no substitute for just trying things out. You're not going to break anything. Nothing's going to blow up. You're not going to accidentally launch nuclear missiles or something like that. So start working with any of the services out there, ChatGPT, Google Bard, Microsoft Bing, doesn't matter. I'm a Copilot, and start trying to figure out what these tools are capable of to build your own skills. Yes, you can find examples all over the place, and yes, there are courses. We have a course, etc. But at the end of the day, just like running a marathon, there is no substitute for getting out and hitting the pavement, right? You can read all you want about it. You can buy the right shoes and read all about diet stuff, but until you actually put one foot in front of the other, you don't know anything about the act of running a marathon. The same is true of AI. Read and study and take courses, yes, but at the end of the day, you just got to do it.
Yeah, I used to work at Nike for almost 2 decades. And then what I was telling to people, because I was the running brand director for a while, and then I was telling to my team is that if you don't run, you will not be able to understand the hurdles that a runner would face, like the mental mindsets, the physical things that you have like in their feet and so on. So I think we should also keep in mind that AI is not a pro runner. And then when it comes to some human things, we are still the pro runner, but AI is like a very nice mental or physical coach most of the time. So, yeah.
That's a good way of putting it, but I would also caveat that is for now. The tools continue to evolve very, very rapidly. And what some of the more interesting specialized chatbots, for example, can do, you can have conversations with some of these tools where you don't know that you're talking to a machine, right? It is so capable and so fluent that you're not sure. Like if you took the labels off, you would have a hard time telling if you were talking to a person or to a machine. So as these tools advance, keep looking for opportunities to do things that you're like, oh yeah, this is something I would never hand off to a machine, like doing a focus group. Well, maybe you should at least give it a try.
Yeah, I agree. And I'll wrap up with the final story about you, because I said at the beginning I have 2 stories about you. So I think Marketing Over Coffee is like the podcast the first podcast probably that I've ever listened to. It's how many years has it been going on? More than 10?
17 years this year. It's the second oldest marketing podcast still in operation.
Well, I mean, in 17 years, I mean, like 17 years ago, I was buried myself, like in marketing campaigns that we used to do at Nike. And I started listening to podcasts like in the last 10 years, let's say. But I remember that brief moment that when I read the name of the podcast, Marketing Over Coffee, and I said, if I had a podcast, the name would fit perfectly well to me because, you know, I like coffee. I like to talk about marketing, and I saw, okay, Marketing Over Coffee. And I remember that moment still, which was like 10 years ago. So this is like the second story that I have. And my last question is, what's your favorite coffee place? Since
my house.
Okay. Do you brew, or what type of coffee do you drink?
Typically espresso, although I do have a bunch of different coffee devices. So I have an AeroPress, I have a pour over, I have an espresso machine, I have this, that, other thing. I enjoy coffee, and sort of 2 channels I would encourage you to check out on YouTube. One is Morgan Eckroth, who is the U.S. 2022 barista champion, who has a great channel on coffee, and James Hoffman, who also has a fantastic channel on coffee. And both of them have anything you want to know about coffee, they have covered it to a crazy degree. The one thing I have not seen them cover Turkish coffee yet, with the Ibrik and stuff, but I've seen them cover Vietnamese coffee and of course all the Western forms of coffee.
Yeah. And I'm also like, we also have this Turkish tea pot in our house. I'm not doing coffee at home, but when you come over to New York City, you're more than welcome to join me for a cup of Turkish tea. And then I'll do maybe so when I come over to Boston. Thanks a lot for joining me on this podcast.
Thanks for having me.